began by asking Charlie Taylor why there aren't more initiatives like the one we saw in Lincoln Prison.
It's difficult to set these things up, and sometimes it's because of the structure of prisons.
Right.
So it's quite often hard to get into prisons, to set up organisations. We also hear quite often that people are frustrated by the fact that bits of the regime get in the way. So prisoners aren't always unlocked when they're supposed to be unlocked.
But the fact is that there's just not enough rehabilitation taking place inside prison walls.
Well, yes, we are concerned, have been increasingly concerned since COVID, when prisons were shut down, that it's taking too long for prisons to get up and running again. So we're still, in many of our inspection reports, seeing too many prisoners locked in their cells or locked in the wings without getting into purposeful activity. So classrooms with one or a handful of prisoners in them, farms and gardens that have become overgrown, and workshops that are empty. And ultimately, if we want people to succeed when they come out, to get jobs, to get work, to take care of their families, they need to be involved in the sort of purposeful activity that's going to help.
One of the prisoners interviewed by Paul McNamara, Laura Farris, in this piece said 100% he would reoffend if he leaves prison without getting a job at the other end or a home. 100%. That's the reality, isn't it?
Yeah, and Timpson's, who 10% of their workforce are ex-prisoners, James Timpson, who runs the firm, says that to stop reoffending, you need to give a prisoner 3 things: a job, a home, and someone to love them. They can help with 2 out of the 3. But there has been real progress, actually, in the employment of ex-prisoners, even just in the time that I've been an MP, which is 3 years.
But has there really? Because the prison population that are reoffenders is something like 40%, isn't
Yes,
it?
I think there has, with the rollout of employment hubs. I don't know what you think, Charlie, but they're now in. They were started at the end of 2021, and they're now in 91 prisons. They're like job centres on site. Also, employment advisory boards, which are again in 92 prisons, and they comprise business leaders from companies like Greggs and so on, giving advice on how to present a CV. Even in the first 6 months of those schemes being operational, 4,000 ex-prisoners were leaving with going straight into jobs.
Do you share this cautious optimism?
We're really pleased with things like the employment hubs. We see them doing some excellent work in prisons and making real progress with some prisoners who perhaps haven't been in work at all in the past. But there still are a large number of prisoners who aren't doing enough. They're not busy enough in prisons. They're spending too much time locked behind their door or on the wings when they could be learning the skills they need to be successful when they come out.
Laura, how can you justify a prisoner being locked in their cell for 22 out of 24 hours? 22 out of 24 hours.
Well, look, improving prisoner skills obviously means being out of a cell for longer than that. I don't have the expertise of Charlie.
But the sheer inhumanity, whatever they've done, 22 out of 24 hours in a tiny cell.
All I can say is from the 2 prisons that I visited, the amount of time spent in the cells seemed to vary according to what wing they were on, how close to release they were, whether or not they were engaged in some sort of skills activity. So I'm not sure I can speak about, the standardisation.
That's the reality we saw in Lincoln Prison.
But obviously, it needs more prison officers, and 5,000 are being recruited over the next few years to support these training schemes. And yes, it does, of course, involve prisoners leaving their cells.
Is the brutal reality here, Laura Farris, that it's just not a priority because reforming prisons costs money and does not produce good headlines in papers like the Daily Mail?
I think it is an absolute priority because if you get prisons right and you get the outcomes for prisoners right, then you transform their lives and you transform society.
But we've known this for years. And we've had 13 years of a Tory government. We've had 13 ministers of prisons, 1 a year. That's an even bigger churn than prime ministers in the last year.
Well, look, I accept there is a need for continuity, but it doesn't mean to say there aren't new ideas, new money and new commitment. But
Charlie, the same political point to you. If there's no political priority here, if you don't get the right headlines and it's costly, and people, apart from the prison population and their relatives, are not going to thank you for it. That's why it's lacking the right kind of momentum.
Well, it is costly. It costs around £50,000 to keep someone locked up in prison every year. But ultimately, what is it that we want from our prisons? What do we want from people we're locking up? If we want them to come out from prison, to take their place back in society, to get a job, to take care of their families, then we need to make sure we're filling in the gaps of the skills they don't have when they're in prison. Teaching them to read, teaching them, making them more employable and supporting them in order that when they leave prison, they can go on and lead successful lives.
Laura Farris, Charlie Taylor, thank you very much.